Trezaki Show. I'm the Trev. That's too sweet. Anyway, continuing with the NHL's outdoor games. Come to think of it, I think this is my first outdoor game review of this calendar year. We'll touch more on that later. And today we're talking about the third of 4 outdoor games played in the 2016-17 season, and more importantly, the second game of 2017. Or, if you really want to call it, the 21st outdoor game in NHL history. And for this one, well, of course we're keeping with the rivalry feel. And of course we're keeping with the Chicago Blackhawks as well. But for the 9th Winter Classic, we're going to Busch Stadium, where the St. Louis Blues are going to host those Chicago Blackhawks. It's worth talking about. So let's talk about it. Alright, so the 2017 NHL Winter Classic took place on January 2nd, 2017 from, as mentioned, Busch Stadium in St. Louis, Missouri, which is home of Major League Baseball's St. Louis Cardinals. And this game comes one day after the first game for the 2017 calendar year, that being the NHL's Centennial Classic. Check it out here if you haven't yet. And this is the second Winter Classic to be played on January 2nd, the first time happening in 2012. And that's more or less due to it just being a courtesy to college football and all the board games being played on a Sunday where January 1st happens to fall on. Now, the St. Louis Blues upper management have been showing a lot of interest in hosting an outdoor game since 2011. And with this being announced on March 9th, 2016, well, they finally got what they wanted. And a perfect time, too, as not only has the league been celebrating their centennial year, this season was also the anniversary of the 1967 expansion, which the Blues were a member of. So while the league was celebrating 100 years, the St. Louis Blues were celebrating 50 years. Now, as previously mentioned in the Centennial Classic review, the NHL had considered that for the 2017 Winter Classic, with Toronto Maple Leafs hosting New York Rangers. But as mentioned, with bowl games going on, and with viewership in the US down from last year's Winter Classic, the NHL went with this matchup instead. But even this wasn't the final choice, as really what became the 2017 Stadium Series was also considered being a Winter Classic. But we'll discuss that when we discuss the 2017 Stadium Series. Now, Busch Stadium was chosen mostly due to circumstance, as it was really the only quote-unquote big league stadium St. Louis had. And they also lack a major college team, so a college kind of setting is out of the question. Even when St. Louis had the Rams, they played at Edward Jones Dome. And if we can remember how the 2014 Heritage Classic went, one would think that the NHL would really avoid playing in a dome. So again, with no real other options, Busch Stadium it is. So for the St. Louis Blues, this is their first outdoor game at this point in time. For Chicago, however, this is their 5th outdoor game, or their 4th in 4 years, and their 3rd Winter Classic at this point in team history. And as far as outdoor games are concerned, with the Blackhawks, they're on a 4-game losing streak in outdoor games. So maybe coincidence, maybe not. One can be the ultimate judge of that. And of course, with both teams being in the same division, not to mention the close proximity between St. Louis and Chicago and the rivalry that's kind of existed between them since 1967, this is a make-sense kind of matchup. Attendance for this chapter in the Blues-Blackhawks rivalry came in at 46,556 spectators, which, while still respectable, is at this point the 7th lowest attended outdoor game in league history. And finally, temperature at game time was 38 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 13 degrees Celsius if you speak Canadian. Bit of rain, bit of fog, but still playable. So with all that out of the way, let's go over to the rosters. The St. Louis Blues, well, they have a pretty respectable roster on here. I mean, obvious things out of the way, Jake Allen got your start for this game. Ken Hitchcock's your head coach. And of all the players you have on this team, your Tarasenko's, your Steens, your Stastnys, the only guy who's ever played an outdoor game to this point on St. Louis is Jay Bouwmeester. That was when he played in the 2011 Heritage Classic. So it's not that they're coming in with no experience on this one. Let's talk about the Blackhawks. Well, given how Chicago's roster looked last time they played an outdoor game, not much has really changed. Corey Crawford still gets the start. Joel Quenneville is still your head coach. And it's probably easier just for me to say who's new to the Chicago roster as in terms of who's making a return to an outdoor game. First things first, let's get Brian Campbell out of the way. This is his third outdoor game in his career. But as far as the new players, you got Michael Kempny, Jordan Tutu, Ryan Hartman, Tyler Mott, and Turner Kiro. So really, the roster hasn't changed all that much. With rosters out of the way, let's look at the jerseys. St. Louis, they went with a pretty respectable, pretty classy throwback of their original uniform set. And I don't know, for me, maybe it's just the way the colors mesh with each other. Maybe it's the vintage white. I like this jersey. I always have. So St. Louis, they nailed it when it came to this jersey. Whereas Chicago, they ultimately went with the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Essentially wearing the same jersey they wore in the 2015 Winter Classic, the only difference being the black hem at the bottom. That's about it. Same thing. That in itself is, of course, drawing inspiration from their 1950s jersey set, but it would have been nice if someone got a little artistic on this one. So, now that we've covered all the bases, let's talk about the game. All right, so the first period started off early, almost real early. After it cleared off the faceoff, Michael Kempny scored his second of the season, or the first goal of the game, off of a slap shot from the blue line from Artemi Panarin and Duncan Keith that snuck over Allen's shoulder at 1:02 for that very early 1-0 Blackhawks lead. Now, for Chicago, given their outdoor record at this point, having the early lead, obviously the hope here is to hold on to it. But in terms of getting back to the scoring, well, we don't have any more goals to speak of in the first. For 9 minutes, though, we got some good chances. But between Crawford and Allen keeping the doors closed, that's all they were, was just chances. We'd get our first penalty called at 10:24, where Alex Pietrangelo would get called for slashing before both teams going back to a defense first kind of game. Obviously, nothing much amounted on that power play. And before we close out the first period, Chicago would take their first penalty of the game when Brian Campbell would get called for a delay of game at 17:40. Now, the key words I'm going to be throwing around here is lack of anything on the power play. That'll be your theme for this game. So at the end of the first, Chicago's holding on to that very early 1-0 lead while being outshot 8-6. And again, there were solid chances on both ends for the entire period. But both goalies were locked right in at this point. But again, this is only the first period. There's still 2 more periods to go. So with that, on to the second. Now, while we don't start off the second quite nearly as early as we start off the first, we do see the shots pick up on both sides, which is not a bad thing. We got our first penalty of the second period at 4:29 after Artemi Panarin would get called for holding the stick to give St. Louis their power play, which, again, see previous statement about power plays. The Blues would eventually tie the game, though, at 7:45 when Patrick Berglund would score his 6th of the season on a nice wrist shot in front of Corey Crawford from Jay Bouwmeester and Alexander Steen, further reminding us that there's really no such thing as a bad shot. After almost 3 minutes of more opportunities on both sides and more shots being clocked in, Chicago would get a second chance on the power play as Robbie Fabry would get called for boarding at 10:31. Again, power play. The rest of the second period, though, was more shots and more hits, up until about 1914, when Ryan Hartman would get called for interference to give the Blues their third power play of the game. But with time winding down, the Blues would carry that into the third period, with the score being tied at 1 after 40 minutes. Now, despite what the score says, though, both Crawford and Allen kept busy in the second, with the Blues outshooting the Blackhawks 15-11. And one would think if it weren't Crawford or Allen in net, maybe the score would have been very different. We still have 1 more period to go. So off to the third. Now, if one was hoping for a fast start in the third period, well, that wasn't going to happen. The Blues' defense was solid in the third period, really keeping the Blackhawks away from any chances at all. Our first penalty of this period comes at 4:54 as Ryan Hartman, again, trying to make sure his name's on that score sheet, will put the Blues back on the power play with a slashing call. And while the Blues did get some great chances, nothing materialized. It would be another 5 minutes before we got the last penalty of the game, as Ryan Reeves would get called for interference at 9:33 to give the Blackhawks their third power play of the game. I've already told you about power plays. Nothing more left to say on that. Finally, though, we get a break in the T game at 12:05 as Vladimir Tarasenko, who'd been buzzing around the ice all game long, finally made one count. Initially, Tarasenko was going for the backhand pass, but that bounced off of Nicholas Hjalmarsson's skate and in the net, with the assist going to Robbie Fabry for his 17th on the season to give St. Louis the 2-1 lead in the third period. Seriously, though, Tarasenko was everywhere in this game. In the third period, he was only everywhere else. So the way he was playing, it was only inevitable till he got his name in the goal column. And not even 2 minutes later, Tarasenko would strike again, scoring on a wrist shot just off of Crawford's side for his 18th on the season, or his second in the game, if you want to call it that, from Yuri Laterra and Robbie Fabry at 13:58 to give the St. Louis Blues the 3-1 lead. So if Tarasenko's first goal didn't kill any hopes for the Blackhawks, it's fair to say his second one did, because after that, the Blackhawks were just, at this point, just there. The Blues would end it for real, though, at 18:46, as Alexander Steen would pot the empty netter for his fourth of the season to give the Blues the 4-1 lead late in the third, which ended up being your final score. And not only did the Blues win the game in the third, they outshot the Blackhawks 12-6 for an overall shot total of 35-23 in favor of St. Louis. Now, I wasn't kidding when I said it was all defense in the third for the Blues. But in terms of a rivalry game, this one was kind of weak. I mean, yeah, there was lots of hitting, but only 12 penalty minutes called. And this is a couple teams that have had a rivalry for a very long time. But great game all the same. Made even better in the third thanks to the Blues' efforts. And again, for St. Louis, their first outdoor game results in the win. For Chicago, still only one win in 5 outdoor games at this point, and 0 wins in the Winter Classic. So maybe the great outdoors, it ain't their friend after all. But that was your 2017 NHL Winter Classic. Feel free to give me your thoughts. So that's another one of them Trev's hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. If you have made it to this point, congratulations, my friend. You've made it to the end. And I'm very proud of you for it. You're helping out my watch time immensely, and I can't say enough thank yous for that. So I'm glad you're here, provided you've made it this far. Even if you didn't, I'm still glad you're here. But if you did make it to this point, even if you just want to say, hey, if you're digging what I'm doing, dude, I'm all for it. Throw me a thumbs up. Trust me, a thumbs up, that helps out as much as the watch time. That helps that thing that we talk about all the time, the algorithm. That helps that out a lot. It gives this channel exposure. And trust me, exposure is never a bad thing. But if you really want to, if you haven't done so by now, that red button, that one that says subscribe all over it, come on, you know you want to hit it. I know you want to hit it. The algorithm that we talk about all the time, it knows you want to hit it. And why deny yourself a good thing? It'll make you feel good, make me feel good. And we're pushing for 500 by the end of the year. Really hoping to make that happen. So, fingers crossed, we'll get there. If you really want, if you want to go that extra mile, that link in my description below, that'll take you to my Facebook page. Feel free to join that. I'm posting on there quite frequently, whether it's on my own page, whether it's on other hockey pages, or any, musical pages that might catch my interest. I'm there. So, I mean, you'll find me either way. So, I'd love to see the numbers there, build like the numbers are building here. That'd be a great thing too. So moving forward, as far as outdoor games is concerned, well, like I said at the beginning, this is my first one for 2026. And I'm hoping by the end of 2026, I'll be as caught up to 2020 as I can, if not starting 2021. That's the goal. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Hopefully, I can keep up with these just as much as I have to keep up with everything else. But either way, in the meantime, and between time. Be looking for yourself, Trev. Later.